Hey, this is BIM Depot here. We're doing another tutorial on Revit and how to use the visibility graphic override. So within Revit, there are so many different ways that you can override the graphics or the visibilities of any object. So when there's more than one visibility or graphic override in place on a particular element, Revit does have a hierarchy that it chooses. So within this, on our website, we have a whole list of helpful tutorials and stuff that can be referenced whenever you need them. This one here is posted on our website, so you can see we have this list here, highest priority to lowest priority, 11 to 1, so 1 being the most important that it's going to choose over any other graphic override, and 11 being the least important in Revit's eyes. So we'll start with number 11, project object styles. So if we hop into Revit, really everything, the project object styles, they are the baseline for how Revit chooses to show an object. So this is, if nothing else is applied, this is how it's going to show. So where you access that is within the Manage tab, Object Styles. And here you can see a whole host of elements here. It's really going to show everything. So right now we're in architecture. If we want to show more, we can add MEP, infrastructure. So these are all the actual physical elements. We have annotation objects, analytical model objects, and imported objects. To go back here, so to take, for example, walls here. So we have the line weight, projection, and the cut lines. Projection lines, so this is going to be things like in an elevation or a section view where you can see a wall in the distance, but we're not actually cutting through it. The cut line is going to be things like in the plan. So right now we can see these walls, they're cut pretty thick. So this is a level 5 line weight, whereas the projection line is number 2. And you can also see that the color and the line pattern and also material is also selected within the object style. So if we were to go ahead and change one of these to a number 4, click apply, you can see that this is changed now. So that essentially means there are no other overrides. So the object styles, that is going to take preference over everything else. So this is, again, it's the baseline. So this is how things are going to show throughout the project. And then the overrides are what are going to change them per specific views or, specific view templates, things like that. So number 10, visibility graphics overrides, projection cut lines. So where you access that is within your properties dialog box within Revit. You go to visibility graphics override. You can also hit VG on your keyboard. So if we come down, you'll notice this looks somewhat similar to the object styles dialog box, but there are more options here. So within here, you also get pattern and transparency control. You can do lines similar to the projection lines within object styles, but this is really going to be specific for that view. Alternatively, if this is applied to a view template, then that'll apply for all the views that view template is applied to. Cut lines, similarly, you can control the cut lines and then also the pattern. So click this override. Say we want it back to a number 5 line weight, click OK, apply. You'll notice that we're now back to the number 5 line weight here. Number 9, cut line styles. So this is within visibility graphics override again. You'll notice here, override host layers down here. We will click on cut line styles, click OK. So right now you can't actually see this because of the level of detail within the drawing. So to change that, we will go to the fine level of detail. So you'll notice now that when this is cut, we're cutting through all the different layers. So gypsum board, CMU layers, everything that wall is made up of, it's kind of made up of all of these different layers. So if we go back to visibility graphic override, uncheck this, click apply. So without the override here, you'll notice that we have really thick outline and then thinner interior lines of the wall assembly. So really what this override host layer does, if we click edit, you'll notice within here, this should look really similar for when you're building a wall, ceiling, floor, roof, things like that, those main assembly pieces in Revit. You'll notice that all of these have line weight control, line color, and line pattern control. So this is actually, we're going to make another video for this, so we won't go into the details, but just know that this is one step above your normal visibility graphic override. Number 8, phasing graphic overrides. Within Revit, we have things called phases. So this is really for projects that have multiple phases, or say you're in an existing building and you're doing your new project. So You have things that are existing, things that are new, things that are being demolished, things like that. So within here, under the Manage tab, Phases. So within the phase filters, there are quite a few different settings that we can have applied here. Within this, we can show all. This is generally just going to show everything. So over here, it's essentially saying, how do you want to show that particular thing? So right now, by category, that's saying like don't have any override. If we switched it to overridden, then whatever we have in this graphic overrides here, it's going to show it with that value. If we have an override for a line projection, pattern, cut, things like that, it's going to show that. And then not displayed, it's just not going to show it at all. For example, show complete, we're not seeing any of the demolished or the temporary work. So we'll go back to this. So within this, we have loads of different things here. So show demo and new, we want to see the new work and the demolished work. Show new, so we're only showing new work. Show previous and demos, that essentially means that we're going to see the existing building and what's being demolished. Show previous and new, so that's going to show us the existing building plus the new construction, but it's not going to show us any of the demolished elements. And then show previous phase, so that's going to show us the phase previous to the one that we're in. Graphic overrides. So you'll notice here that you actually have the option to change an object's appearance just based off what phase they're in. Let's go ahead and leave these as they are, and then we can play with these. So if we click on a wall, right now it's phase created, new construction, and it's not phase to be demolished. So let's go ahead and change this to existing. So now that this is existing, you'll notice that this whole wall just turned gray. Essentially what that's doing is telling the contractor or whoever's reading the drawings that this is an existing wall. So this really is available. Similarly for the previous ones, you have both lines, patterns, and then projection versus cut. You can halftone it, so that's a setting that you can set. So that actually reduces the value of that color. So where you set that is in additional settings, halftone underlay, and then here, halftone, you'll see brightness, light versus dark. So if we go all the way dark, click OK, it'll go back to that original gray color. If we go back into halftone, go all the way light, it gets extremely light. So within that, we also have some other things here. So demolished, let's check that out. So let's say this wall is now supposed to be demolished in our new construction. So you'll notice now that you can't actually see it. That's because this view is not set up to see that. But if we switch over to our demo view, you'll notice now that this wall is scheduled to be demoed. So new, that's generally going to be, if you're overriding this, it's going to show everything that is new construction as singular line type or material or halftone. Our temporary, so this is an interesting one. So temporary, okay. So level 1, let's say we have a temporary wall that we want built out for construction purposes. We can show this as being built during the new construction, but then once construction is complete, we actually want that removed. So if we do phase created new construction and phase demolished new construction, so here it's disappearing, but we will want to change our phase filter to show it. So currently we are set up as show previous and new. So let's go ahead back to our phase filters. So right now you can see temporary is not displayed. Let's go ahead and switch that to overridden. Click OK. You'll notice that it's not showing it in this particular way because that's how the overrides for temporary elements are shown. Coming back to our list, number 7, depth queuing. So this is an interesting one. It's really quite helpful in sort of more presentation-based things. We'll show this in an elevational view. So if we look here and maybe just a little bit of context in this model here. So there are quite a few layers here. So there's an existing building front. We have like a secondary layer here of some more buildings and then penthouse areas. So essentially what we're seeing here is a lot of information that spans over, potentially quite a bit of distance here. But right now, the way that we're set up, we're actually showing everything all as black and really strong. So it's kind of hard to understand depth within this drawing. So depth queuing, what that is, it essentially starts to fade out some of the portions in the background, and it really lets the pieces in the front start to stand out. The way that you access this, at the bottom here, you click on graphic display options, click on depth queuing, and then check the box that says show depth. Click apply. And now you notice that once we clicked apply, a lot of the stuff in the background, it actually started to gray out, almost like a halftone. And, you can start to read the stuff that's up front much better. So there are some options within this. So this here, fade start end location. So you can start to play with this and really see how it works. So it starts to control how much the objects in the background and foreground are faded out. And then the more you play with this, the more you can see. There are definitely some advantages of doing particular things over the others. And then there's also the fade limit percentage. So right now we're at 0%, so light, and then if we go all the way dark, click apply, you'll see that comes really present again. So this essentially just shows the limit of how light it's going to make that furthest element. So if you play with this slider a bit, you'll start to notice that you can completely fade out certain objects here. So get to a depth that is shorter than the furthest elements within the model. It's actually going to completely hide it. But then as you start to grow this a bit, you can start to see more and more elements. So for example, this guardrail here is barely visible, so we know that's like right at the precipice of when this limit is set. And then fade. We can start to fade how much that actually fades things out. So number 6, view depth beyond line style. So this is also an interesting one. Let's go to a different level here. There are some objects that are low. So this right here is a double height opening. You can see a corridor here, stairs that are going downwards, and then double height stairs. Right now you can see there are some objects, some additional stairs, and some guardrails. Essentially what view depth is doing, it's showing the objects that are in that further distance, showing it as a lighter color. It is a little bit different from the depth queuing. It is working in a different way. So if we go to our view range, click edit, and then show here. So you'll notice that Revit has this diagram here, and it starts to show you all of the different categories that are associated with these parameters. So you'll see here, number 6, view depth. View depth is essentially this area in yellow. Just to explain some of this, your top one, so this primary top range, so that's this parameter here. It's essentially where the camera is set up when you're looking down in a plan. Number 2, primary range cut plane. So that's this line here. So that's actually where you're making your plan cut, whether that's cutting through a wall, door, window, etc. That's essentially where that cut's happening. And then your camera's up here and looking down. Number 3, primary range bottom. So typically this is done at the floor level that you're looking at. This is the primary depth at which it's going to show things at detail. Number 5, primary range. So this is essentially from this top to bottom. That's that entire space right here. So view depth is this yellow area right here, and that is controlled right here, view depth level. Right now I have this set to unlimited. That's essentially going to show everything in the entire model that is below this cut line. And then view range, it is the entire range of this top level all the way to this level here. Where the view depth beyond line style comes in, essentially what's happening is the override is everything that's in this yellow box right here. It's going to show as our beyond line style. So if we click OK to get out of this, within the Manage tab, go to Additional Settings, Line Styles, hit the little plus button. So now we'll see that we have our Beyond here. It's a default line style that Revit has. So you can't actually remove this from the project because it is something within the system of Revit. So right now we can see that we're set to this light gray, and that's essentially what this is pulling from. So if we click on this light gray, and just to show the power of this, if we change it to red, then we go back and click apply, you'll notice that everything that was in that yellow range, so to pull that back up, so everything that is within this range here, it's now being shown as red. So it's essentially just telling it, all right, this is just background information. We want to see this in a lighter style, in this case red. Yeah, so that can be really powerful. And the way that this differs from the depth queuing actually makes it a rasterized image, whereas this keeps it as a vector graphics. So it can be really difficult if you go to print as a full construction document set. It's going to be difficult in PDS to like snap to any vector line work, and potentially some issues with taking measurements or just, reading a clear vector image as a construction document. It might cause some confusion or even, cause some errors within the field. So number 5, view filters. This is controlled under visibility graphics override again. If you click on the tab filters, you can see it here. Essentially what it is that it's a way of changing certain types of a category, but not all of them. If you change something here, it's going to change everything of that category. So everything that's a ceiling, it's going to change. If you tab over into filters, this is going to allow you to select certain things. For example, if we wanted to show concrete walls, we can go to edit new, do new, walls _ concrete, click OK. So the way that you do this after you've created a new filter, categories here. So this is going to have all your typical Revit categories. Scroll down, select walls. Within here, we are now selecting all walls. You can select by which parameter you want to choose from. So let's choose from the type name. Here, it allows you to choose the way in which you're selecting it. So for example, we want to search for concrete. So type name, so we're going to select type name contains concrete. So now essentially what we're saying is search for all walls in this view. You're going to search by type name, and if it contains concrete. So you can kind of go through this list and understand exactly how each of these work. So it's nice. It generally has the negative of each one. So what I mean by that is that does not contain. If we switch to this, we'd be saying search for all walls that aren't concrete. And it's nice. It also has some ones that are good for parameters that are, say, like length or number based, whether that's dimension, quantity, things like that. You can search for it by that as well. So once we have that set up, we click OK, click Add, scroll down, find our filter that we just made, and click OK. So now it's going to add it here. So this should look familiar at this point. These projection, line, pattern, transparency, and then our cut lines and patterns, and then also halftone. Once we're there, we can click on any of these chains. Let's say we want to add a light background to all the concrete walls. We're going to click on our pattern. Do a light gray, click OK, and OK. So once we do that, let's click Apply. Now, all the walls that are named have concrete within their type name are going to receive this gray background. To show off some of this other stuff, right here, this checkbox visibility. So what that's going to do is completely shut off all the walls that meet this filter criteria. Let's click Apply. It's going to completely hide that from the project now. That's really nice if there are certain things that you actually don't want to see within a view. So let's say we wanted to hide all the finishes because they weren't important to that view. That's a good way to do it. And then this checkbox here, enable filter, if we uncheck it, click Apply, it's going to completely shut down everything within this filter. You can think of this as an on-off switch. Number 4, override graphics in view by the element. So what this is, if we click on an element, right click, go to override graphics in view by element. These should also look pretty familiar, so it's all the same categories. But let's say we wanted the color of the walls to be red, the cut line, click Apply. You'll notice that this wall now turned red. Let's reset that. So if we do the same operation and then click on category and do red, click Apply, you can see that it's now adjusting every element within that category. So in this instance, walls, it's now taking that over and showing it as red. So this can be really nice if you have something very specific for all the walls or windows or doors in the project or within that view that you wanted to show, but not particularly in other views. Number 3, graphic display options, silhouette edge. What this one does is allows the outline edge of objects to be thicker than the other lines within that same element. So how we display that, we click on the visual style button, graphic display option. Within this first dropdown, you'll see silhouettes, do the dropdown, and then this is the line styles within the project. We'll go ahead and click wide lines and then Apply. you'll notice that all of the lines along this border are now thicker. You'll also notice that some of the lines that appear in front of other objects are showing thicker as well. So if we zoom around, you'll notice that this actually changes when you start to move around. This is a really dynamic way to really give some emphasis to objects within the project, and it's really helpful for presentation drawings as well. Number 2, override graphics in view by element halftone. This is essentially within that same override graphics in view by element, but it's really just a halftone checkbox. So if we do that, click override, so it's going to even override some of the other overrides that are within that same dialog box. And then the last one, the line work tool. So this is the highest priority that Revit gives to any override tool within the program. So how this works, in the Modify tab, in the View subcategory, you'll notice line work. So you click on that. So within the line work tool, you can choose any of the line styles that you have in the project. So let's say we wanted to do a dashed line. Let's show it for one of the lines in the wall. So now you can see that it's just overriding that one that we clicked on. The other line here, so the other outline here, you can tell it still has this thick line, whereas this one that we selected is now dashed. So you can also come here and click on invisible lines. This will actually allow you to hide particular lines within the view. So let's say we wanted to hide this floor line. Click on it. So now you can no longer see that line of the floor, but if there was another area, let's say we wanted to see this one, it's still showing. So it's really helpful to be selective on what you're showing within the project. If you wanted to undo this, you would come up, go to by category, and then select the lines that you want to restore to normal. We have all this information available on our website within our Revit Resource Center. This is super helpful for me. I use it all the time. It's particularly useful if you have something that's overridden in a view, but you can't figure out why it's overridden. So I typically will come here and just go down the list, starting from 1 and going down, and checking each one. And that typically helps me figure out what the issue is. You can bookmark this. I have this bookmark typically, and then whenever you run into that issue, it's really simple to click here, and then you are in the correct place.